is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and as promised, this is a smackdown between the 2017 HP Spectre X2 Most Improved Tablet and the Microsoft Surface Pro 2017 edition, where Microsoft just was so modest when they said, hey, it doesn't even get a new model number because we didn't make that many changes. Well, they sure actually really did. Changes that make it feel like the next generation in computing. What do I mean by that? The fact that you don't even have a fan in the Core i5, which is unheard of, and the Core i7 that runs cool. It's cool, it's quiet, the battery life is really very good on it. Then we have the HP Spectre X2, which now packs the same kind of specs and horsepower that you would find in Surface Pro instead of being an Intel Core M. Higher resolution display than previous generation, in fact, slightly higher resolution than the Microsoft Surface Pro, though when you're talking 150 pixels here, 200 there, it doesn't make much of a difference in 12.3 inches. Not so much. So it's not an easy decision. Obviously, the HP Spectre, $1149 to $1299, depending on whether you want a Core i5 or Core i7, is going to be the more affordable option compared to the Microsoft Surface Pro, which granted starts at $799, but that's a Core M3. So we're just going to compare Core i5, Core i7s here to be on parity. And also, the keyboard and the pen are included with the Spectre, so that's $260 worth of spend in addition if you're going to get a Surface Pro. Now, it's interesting. I always say that you kind of get what you pay for. If it's a more expensive product, it's probably better in some ways, but how meaningful is it, especially as you go higher and higher in the price range, right? You know the idea. $50 headphones versus $500 headphones, probably most people will hear the difference, but the $5,000 headphones, the law of diminishing returns. And I was wondering if Surface products were actually starting to hit that. Granted, they're not as insanely expensive or overpriced, but they're kind of getting up there. And as it turns out, the Surface Pro wins in almost every category. But the real point of this is, it's that important enough to you to shell out $400 more approximately on a Surface Pro. So let's talk about that. When it comes to displays, same size, almost the same resolution, both IPS technology, both very good displays. The Surface Pro has less glare, has higher contrast ratio, and it has a better white point. So overall, it's the more pleasant and easy on the eyes display to look at, but the HP Spectre X2 display is no slouch either. Despite its bizarre high white point, calibrating fixes that pretty well. It's not as bright, 400 nits versus 465 nits, but you look at it, you can see it. It's still a beautiful looking screen. There you have it. When it comes to performance, here's the interesting thing, because both models of the X2 have Core i5 and i7 CPUs, sure, but they have Intel Iris Plus 640 graphics. That's pretty interesting right there. So with the Surface Pro, you have to go up to the $1,600 model, the Core i7 model, to get the Iris 640 graphics, which is a small improvement. You're still talking about 15-watt packages here, CPUs, integrated graphics, so they can only use so much power, and that's a limiting factor. Still, it's a little extra tweak, a little bit extra oomph. But the interesting thing, if you take a look at our graph here, is that our Core i7 Spectre X2 here with Intel Iris 640 graphics is a little bit faster, but not a whole lot faster than our Core i5 model here. This is the $1299 model. It has 8 gigs of RAM and a 256 gig SSD inside. Interesting. And if you look at the benchmarks for the Core i7 Surface Pro, wow, it really jumps ahead. So there is a performance difference there. Now, how much performance do you need in an itsy-bitsy little 12-inch tablet? You know better than me. Some of you are turning these into your only laptop, so the more performance, the better. For others of you, these are just secondary machines for note-taking. You totally don't care as much about performance then. For graphic arts, if you're using Clip Studio Paint, it's not that demanding. It's not that important. If you're using Photoshop, it does start to matter. Now, when it comes to heat and noise, well, with the Core i5 and the Core M Surface, there is no fan. There is no noise. It's silent. With the Core i7, there is a fan, but it's not that loud. It's a much improved thing over Surface Pro 3 and Surface Pro 4. It will get hot on the back, and both of these will. This has a really interesting heatsink design inside. It's like a spider shape, four-way copper coming out at you. So it spreads the heat across here. If you're doing very demanding things, like I use Civ 6 as one of the tests for something that's quite demanding on it, it'll get pretty toasty on the back, like 45 degrees centigrade. Uh, our HP gets burning hot on the back. It approaches 50 degrees centigrade, and it's not comfortable at all. So there is a difference there in terms of the heat. And also, I think that there's a little bit of firmware throttling going on. It's pretty obvious with the HP, because we can see as we keep pushing and doing something like Civ 6 or extended Adobe Premiere tests, that the clock speed of the CPU will drop a little bit, even though it's not indicating thermal throttling. So it's trying to maintain the wattage of the package and also not get even hotter. So you're getting a cooler, quieter product with Surface. So keyboard and trackpad. Well, the HP is a clone of the Surface, so it has the same detachable kind of keyboard, magnetic with the pogo pin connectors, very, very similar design, but the HP has metal on the top deck. You can feel it, you can touch it. It's just metal right there instead of that Alcantara covering, and there's, metal underneath with the Surface keyboard. Still, the HP feels a little more rigid, so for those of you who didn't like that little bit of flex in the Surface type cover, you might like the HPs better. I find them both equally enjoyable, to tell the truth. You get more color options. I guess you can be more styling with the Surface Pro, and with the HP, you get that peace of mind of more rigidity, and the backside on it, instead of being Alcantara, is a very rubbery, rugged kind of cleanable surface, so you don't have to worry about getting it icky, spilling your coffee on it. It would wipe right off. Trackpad, on the other hand, better on the Surface Pro, definitely. The Elan trackpad is quite large on the Spectre X2, but it's not as precise. It's too fast. It's a little bit harder to control your cursor movements. It's not a terrible trackpad, but it's just not as ooh la la fantastic as the Surface. They both have front Windows Hello cameras, and they both work about equally as well. And usually any anomalies with those are tuned with a couple of driver updates going down the road. Both have front-firing stereo speakers in almost the exact same location, Clone Village, here we are. The Spectre has good speakers for a 12-inch tablet. It's not a lot of room for drivers in there, right? The Surface Pro, though, sounds a bit better. It has a little more bass, a little bit more presence. It doesn't sound quite as tinny, but again, the Spectres, they're pretty decent still, Battery life, here's another ouchie for the Spectre. Gosh, I guess you do really get what you pay for, huh? Now, HP claims 8 hours of battery life. Of course, Microsoft has these crazy claims, 13, 14 hours, and, yeah, in real-world use with the brightness set to 40% on both of these, doing a mix of productivity, using Photoshop, that sort of thing, connected via Wi-Fi to the interwebs. The Spectre does about 6 hours or so. You might get a little bit less depending on what web browser you're using. I use Edge, tends to have better gas mileage, so to speak. And easily I get 8 hours on the Surface Pro, so there you have it. So both of these have N-Trig pens. Those are active pens, active digitizer technology, palm rejection, all that good stuff, pressure levels, plenty of pressure levels of sensitivity. The Spectre's feels a little bit more like the just recently passed generation of N-Trig digitizers, whereas the Surface Pro is that brave new world of, wow, that's an N-Trig digitizer that's been tweaked just for the Surface Pro, and Microsoft bought N-Trig, so hey, they get to do that, The line jitter is better on the Surface Pro. The latency is noticeably better on the Surface Pro. I can see the latency with the naked eye on the Spectre. It's not unusual, but I can see it. I can't see it without using slow motion camera on the Surface Pro. Initial activation force is better on the Surface Pro, but that becomes variable with the Spectre. If you use the HP included active pen in the box, that one requires more force to start making a mark on the screen, but you can use the Wacom Bamboo Ink. It's a recent dual protocol pen that Wacom started shipping. It's available in Best Buy and other stores for $70. That one has much lower initial activation force, and I would recommend that too. A little bit less line jitter than HP's pen. The new Surface Pro pen works on the Spectre, but it has a lot of jitter, I noticed. The initial activation force is good, so I wouldn't choose it. So it's interesting here with N-Trig because a lot of the intelligence is actually in the pens, how much variety you can have just by switching pens, sometimes subtle, sometimes big. But overall, the pen experience is better on the Surface Pro. I think it's going to matter more to artists than note takers. I think they're both plenty good enough for note taking. But for art folks, yeah, the Surface Pro is really getting there in terms of being a pleasant experience if you're doing something like concept art, say, where you're doing much more painterly strokes, that sort of thing. If you're doing comic art, that sort of thing, I think both of these will do the job fine. So there you have it. They walk alike, they talk alike. I mean, they have a lot in common. They look very similar. They both have kickstands, slightly different design, obviously, the kickstand, but functionally they work about the same. They weigh about the same. They're about the same thickness. Aesthetically, you be the judge. They're both very pretty metal-clad tablets. You know, it's a matter of taste as to which you like better. The ash silver gunmetal look with gold, or the kind of modern vapor magnesium look of a Surface. Afraid to say you still do get what you pay for, though. In pretty much all counts, the Surface Pro is a winner here. But is it $400 better? Well, now you've heard the things that are different between them, particularly the heat, the noise, and the battery life being the biggies there, and the pen, though really matters more for artists than for note takers, like I said. So now you can decide, is it worth the extra spend on the Surface Pro? I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.